She's joining now, sir.
Okay.
Hang on a moment.
All right. So we talk about dog tags, intervals. Folks in the business, it's like most people get a dog tag annually because that's when they go in, they get their shots, they get an annual test. To get a 3-year shot for rabies, you have to ask for that, and most people don't know to ask for it, they don't ask for it.
Yes.
So, and just for the ease of Andrew's department, trying to keep up with the owners of the dogs, you know, an annual registration is the best way to do it. I mean, you're not talking about charging anything, it's just you gotta go in and fill out the paperwork, hand the paperwork once a year. And if you do, I'm gonna make an amendment to this, the tag shall be valid the calendar year in which they're issued, must be renewed annually. But also, we need to, when you do your application, what we need to ask them for is just get a copy of your vet's vaccination record, and they'll give it to you. That's part of the deal. And you just bring that and hand it to them, they'll know you are. Everybody's up to date, no question, no problem. And annually, you'll know that everybody's up to date, and you'll know if their contact information is correct, at least at that point in time. So, and then you got a letter from, you got an email, not a letter, email from Carol, who they're trying to get zoomed up now. And originally, in the beginning, and this thing's been around longer than I was on council, so from way beyond 2002, the dog tags was for 2 reasons. One, to make sure they got inoculated with rabies, because we have so much potential for rabies out here, with raccoons and foxes and whatever else. And 2 is because when the dog goes to jail, if they have a tag or they've been chipped and the chip's registered, these guys know who to give the dog back to. So they call you and say, hey, your dog's in jail, come collect it. And that was a community service is why that was put into place about the tag.
And these guys have a scanner to scan for the chips, right?
Yeah, if your dog's been chipped,
Yeah.
we have a scanner. Now, it takes a little bit of time on that because we scan it and then you have to send that number, you don't have a way to trace it back.
I'm not sure going free is the exact approach I would take. I mean, when I was over animal control, what we did was differential licensing. So if you had an animal that was spayed or neutered, you got your license much cheaper. And if you had a dog that was not altered, you paid more for your license. And that was to encourage people to spay and neuter their pets. But that might be something we look at down the road.
Well, the reason we talked about doing away with the fees is just because of the money handling.
Right.
And
It's one stop instead of go downstairs, pay, come
Yeah,
upstairs.
back and forth, back and forth. And we weren't making money at the fees, so it was more for community service action.
Well, in the last go-around, as the one to propose the change, I'll certainly acquiesce to Chief in terms of what he views to be best logistically. I had suggested in the context of having less burden upon citizens coming before us once every 3 years, corresponding to the rabies vaccination versus once per year. And similarly, I would have thought that there would be more lift for you having to interact with the public every year versus 3. The only thing I'll suggest is theoretically, if you had to move to the community in, let's say, October, and they completed the paperwork, they did not pay the fee, of course, they get their tag, that's good through the next 2.5 months. Would they have to come back in January, or if you came across this pet in the next year, then they had a tag from the prior year, is that going to be viewed as problematic for them? So I don't know if there's a way to do this on a rolling 12 versus calendar year.
Yeah, we've talked about that on our end, logistical wise, as far as doing like that rolling 12 months, because what happens if you just go strictly January to December, you know, somebody's vaccination might actually run out in March, and then they basically have you know, however many, 8 months of unchecked time. So we've talked about creating, or we have created a spreadsheet that can alert us when someone's coming up for expiration. And I've assigned it, one of our dispatchers was looking for some responsibility, so I assigned that to her, so I'm following up. And so that's how we plan on handling it on our end, you know, aside from whatever decisions y'all make and how that impacts us, but is doing just that. And not only that, but we've talked about, so if Billy has a dog, his dog is permit number 1, and as long as Billy owns that dog, it's gonna be permit number 1. Because that makes it easier on us too. Yes, no matter how often you have to renew it, it's fine, but it'll just be easier. There's reasons why it'll be easier on our end. But those are just some logistical things we've talked about doing on our end.
Okay, so I wasn't entirely clear. You're going to do it on the rolling 12 or not?
That's what we want to do.
Okay.
Because what we didn't want to happen, one, we didn't want everybody to have to come into the public safety department in January with whatever month, you know. It's just, you know that your rabies vaccination, you know, you're gonna have to take the vet anyway. So once that vet gives you that fresh, you know, order that has the dates on it, bring that to us to renew your permit. And that way it kind of trickles in all year versus kind of getting everything all at one time is what helps us out the most. Regardless of 3 years or 1 year, whatever, it's just not having it all right at once is helpful.
Mhm. That makes sense. And if you cause a pet that does not have these credentials, is there a penalty for the dog owner?
Yeah, there's actually an ordinance against not having your dog licensed, but that happens a lot just from the perspective of the visitors. But you know what I mean? It's not very often that happens for residents. Everybody seems to know and do it, at least that we're aware of. We haven't caught a bunch of people's dogs that ran away that weren't permitted, I guess, is our tag.
But even if you catch one as a resident, I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't let him take the first time you caught it. Now, if he's a frequent flyer.
No, 100%. I mean, for the most part, it's always education first as much as possible. A lot of times the person's behavior is a dictator of how that goes. Like you said, if it's somebody that we routinely have problems, we're routinely chasing down their dog, yeah, that might be a different story, but no, there's not gonna be tons of tickets written. So, that helps.
It does, thank you.
So really, the registration is just to prove that they have vaccinations.
Yeah, and you know who the dog is, so you find.
Right, like with chips and everything else. that
Well,
most
a
dogs
lot of
have
people don't have
nowadays.
chips. If you have a tag, it's definitely, and that doesn't cost, it costs zero.
Okay, I just think it's a lot of steps. I mean, I don't see where we get a benefit out of it at all.
Any tags at all? At all?
Making people register them year after year after year, I mean, other than to know that they're immunized, I mean, I don't, not for all that headache.
I think Carol has some things to say on that. I mean, I know.
I'm sure she
She has
does.
worked with pet helpers for several years, and she handles a lot of the strays and animals that we take in. So she's a professional in this business. when it
Well,
comes to-
and out here, like I said, originally it was done for 2 reasons. One was civic service, so you can get your dog back, and 2, because of the rabies probability in association with the number of raccoons and foxes and bobcats and deer and other wildlife that carries rabies that we have out here. So, you know, to know that all the dogs are, at least the ones that we're getting registered, and we hopefully we get all of the residents registered or vaccinated.
So this comes up at the meeting, will there be an opportunity to amend it so that it's a rolling 12?
Well, I just wrote down on this thing, so what we probably need to do is just, where red line is those tags issued in the calendar year, just minutes of tags shall be issued on a rolling calendar year and must be renewed annually in that rolling year.
Once issued, it's good for a year.
I want to ask you a question. How are you going to keep up with, if I get a permit number, because we talked about doing this for golf carts and we never could make that work. How are you going to do it now for dogs?
There's just not that many dogs compared to some others. So for us, looking at
It's not many
that,
dogs registered.
well, yeah, I mean, of course. But for us, our plan is to log everything into that spreadsheet that's got alerts set. I'm gonna know, like, so if his expires and he doesn't renew it, we're gonna know that he didn't renew it. We can reach out to him and say, hey, you haven't renewed, you bring in your information, because it's gonna have his contact information on the application. But let's say he has never had a pet, you know, he's just not gonna have a tag. Maybe I didn't understand the question quite.
No, I was asking you, how are you gonna keep up with, originally when we set up the golf cart tags, it was supposed to be like, if you got number one, you have number one forever. And that was gonna be, but we never could figure out how to make that work. So how are you gonna make it work for the pet licenses, was my question.
Honestly, just like that. I think, I can't remember, there were a bunch of concerns with keeping the same golf cart number. And I'm trying to remember exactly what that was. I'd have to look in my old records, but with this, it just seemed like it's not something that we see a lot of problems with. It's not like, you know, like we're not bringing in a bunch of dogs that haven't been registered, or we're not getting a lot of complaints of dog bites and things of that nature. So for us, it just seemed like that would be the,
And my other question is, if Carol is successful, and I register Lucky in January, because that's when he gets his shots, he gets them all at one time. And she convinces me to get another dog in June, I got permit number 5 for Lucky, I'm gonna have permit number 75 for the other dog, so you're gonna have to keep up with me twice.
sure.
Yeah.
2 different permits.
I do know the Allen database, which is currently being used to store some of that stuff, and we have
But, yeah,
a couple other ones that will look it up by name, and I believe it will search by number as well, so you could, and they do keep hard files there behind you. Yeah, I know, but it's a necessity. All I would recommend is make sure you have enough, you know, both years of dog tags, because as people roll through,
Yeah.
if they do come in June, then you could go ahead and give them a 22 or 21 or whatever.
But if you're gonna have, if it's gonna be permanent, why not just buy a better tag
So that was the thought process.
and not change out, not
Right.
like purple one year and gold the next year? 'Cause your
Yeah.
dog is like a license plate.
You just get
Yes.
permit number 1.
Little sticker on it.
Yeah, miniature sticker.
You just lose hair when you pull the sticker off every year.
I do think it will have to be a better tag though than the ones we have now.
Because I mean, I'll speak to my dog, but you know, I got the tag on there that's got its name and where it
Right.
belongs. I got another one that has its rabies. I got another whatever. I'd never see that when the dog's running down the street. I can't tell what color, type, what it says on there. So for us, it's just easier. Like, I got a nice quality tag, it's your number. If I come across your dog because your dog's loose or your dog has bit somebody, I call dispatch. Hey, I got tag number 1. They can say yes, it's valid through this whatever time frame. This is who it belongs to. Here's the phone number, email, whatever. It just logistically it seemed like something we can handle. So.
So it's not really the year that you're looking for on the tag if we switch to these new ones, it's just, is it valid and current, which
Yes.
will be, kind of fluctuate through the year. Okay, that was my question. Okay.
Okay.
Carol, if you'd like to speak, council's listening.
Council, I couldn't hear a word y'all said, and I obviously am not zoomed in because nothing's working here. However, I, at the end of the day, strongly urge, if this is where we're at, because I couldn't hear anything up until this point, that we minimally stay with annual license tag registrations if that's where you're at. For the obvious reasons that I emailed that to you last night, much easier to track. When you get into 3 year, there's too much moving around of people, addresses, and changes for city ID tags, and that's a huge issue for me. Unless you, the only other possible mitigation of that might be and/or microchip. Microchips, obviously, and that's something I want to bring up later on for cats, but it's the same issue right now for a cat or a dog picked up on the island that we need to ID. My other issue is finding injured animals, and I've had several significant injuries and call-outs by public safety for cats hit by cars very badly late at night. And finding an owner, one cat was $4,000. Well, when you go to the emergency vet, you are hoping to heaven you've got somebody ID to that pet, because otherwise I'm standing good for that via pet helpers. So, you know, registration ID is critical, and keeping it annual or something like a microchip where that tracks with the animal forever is important for me, and I think for public safety as well, obviously, because they're just as engaged with this as I am, or we are. Every 3 years is not a good option if you're talking license tags. unless you tie it into a microchip somehow.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks, appreciate that.
I'm just gonna sit here and wait. I can't hear or see anything, so you can say whatever and I won't necessarily hear you.
All right. Well, I think we got that. We can move on to the next subject for the emergency order. Fourth Amendment emergency order, and it pretty much goes down to keeping the face mask enacted as the governor asked municipalities and cities to, towns and cities and municipalities to do, counties. Talk to folks about the outside eating areas, and most of them are going to want to continue spreading the people out, not having them all inside. Well, everybody except St. James Gate, they got a little patio in the back, Taco Boy, and Snapper Jacks. So that corner, basically. So all the parking spaces in front of those places, make sure they're open back up. But everybody else has still got their little spots to move. Now, we didn't keep the parking spaces closed off in front of City Hall just for construction. More for those guys than any kind of eating place. But, so that's where we are for that one. Anybody got any questions or comments? So the community center discussion, this come about because we're to the public right now, but it also showed up that we had businesses, and we're talking about the place being closed, and if we want to open it up for renting for anybody, I think we ought to say, you know, it's called whatever that is, you sign the agreement, and it's going to cost you after every day that you use it, it's going to cost you whatever it costs us to get the place de-germed, fogged, clean, whatever you want to call it, whatever they call it, disinfected system. I don't know what it costs to do that, we'll have to find that out. But that would be part of the cost of doing business right now during COVID-19, that you would, if you want to rent a place, you want to have a birthday party, a family reunion, a business, whatever, at the end of the day, you're going to pay the cost, because it's going to cost the city to have it come back in and have it disinfected.
Wouldn't all that be in the normal rental guidelines and registration? No, I mean, just the fact of having a complete separate lease just for one thing is like, that should just be able to be tightened up in the rental process.
We don't have a lease in the rental process.
Well, not because I don't think we need an entire lease. I think you can probably put a line or two in there that would cover the concerns that you rental guidelines and be just fine. Personally, I mean, I don't think we need a whole nother. It's just more government for nothing when you can add a sentence or two to the rental registration and be fine.
Well, I think, Tommy, you added it, sentence up pretty much with what Mr. Wilson come up with a lease agreement.
I didn't even read through it. It was a whole page. I can't see where we need to add guidelines and restrictions for something that should really be a sentence or two in the rental registration. I mean, most of the stuff that you just mentioned should be in there anyway.
Well,
And now if we're going to charge them an extra fee, that's just an addendum. Hey, it's going to cost you an extra $50 for sanitizing after, you know, your event is over with.
But I don't think we have anything in our rules and regulations, other than it costs so much for the daytime, it costs so much for the nighttime.
And put it in there.
And right now, we were only talking about, and I think this ought to spill over into the park too, because we don't have to disinfect the park. But if you're gonna run a business on a piece of city property, you ought to be treated just like the franchises. I mean, you ought to have to, one, find out if anybody else wants to bid on that process, and two, you know, we're gonna charge you a fee plus a percentage of your business. I mean, if we do the service by not doing that.
Franchises are on the beach.
Is this when we talk about priorities and different things? For example, to me, it's a whole different ballgame. When you have, I mean, you don't even have an office. So to me, this has become so much more city important than I've ever seen. So I guess my question is more, can we make decisions that are like right now, 'cause, I mean, doing long-term leases, and is it all those details? In my mind, at this point, you're in a place where it's space utilization, it's priorities. To me, priority is the city, your city business, your city function, whatever that is. After that, then it's the nonprofits, it's, you know, all those clubs that expect, hopefully at some point, to come in. And then, I mean, you could decide, and then it's the library, that's a third use. And then you can start to see, I mean, my observation, just because I was here, I mean, you're starting to reduce the time, even if we got to businesses, when would they fit in? So, to me, I mean, I don't think we have to make all the decisions tonight, but I do think we need to decide how we need to utilize this space, what are the priorities, and then if we go to businesses and they make profit, then that's a different system, in my mind.